For nearly 3 decades, this leafy facade at Cooranbong near Lake Macquarie hid a terrible secret. More than 100 people with intellectual disabilities were crammed into dirty rooms, with little supervision and often not enough to eat.
We cannot have people with disabilities living in substandard care, and therefore we moved to closure.
State government departments moved in today, after months of preparing the residents for the biggest move of their lives. It comes after years of concern about the quality of care at the isolated institution. But it was the combination of a damning report into mental health, the strangling of a resident, media coverage and the care of health workers that finally shut the door on the Watagan Centre.
I don't think we could probably imagine a bigger change for most of these people.
It's a remarkable change. The small, dingy rooms replaced with fully furnished homes in the middle of suburbia. The program hopes to integrate people with intellectual disabilities into the general community. At first, they'll be supervised 24 hours a day, but once they get used to their new independence, they'll slowly be given more freedom. There's still one hurdle the new residents have to overcome, the fears of some neighbours about living next door to people with intellectual disabilities. But if history's any guide, any apprehension won't last for long.
When people first moved out, a little bit less than half of the neighbours were feeling a bit anxious and a bit worried about what the outcomes would be. A year later, nearly all of those people, 93% of the neighbours interviewed, were really happy.
The closure is the result of a combined effort by the Department of Community Services and the newly formed Department of Ageing and Disability, and now other institutions have been put on notice.
If there are places where there are a history of problems, it is inevitable that they will be looked at more closely because we have a duty of care to these people.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
We'd like to see an agreement with the Hunter Media, with the Newcastle Herald, with what we want to do is to improve housing for people, encourage every general. A lot of the problems experienced by people with mental illness and their carers and their families all come down to attitudes. My attitude, your attitude.
Marconi is one of the glamour sides of the A-League, and while the result may have been disappointing, the Breakers' performance was encouraging.
I thought we played probably a better game than we did the home game on Friday night. Possession-wise, we kept it a little bit better and probably had more chances than we created Friday night, but unfortunately the result wasn't there.
In just their second game together, the match wasn't beyond Newcastle until Francis Awaratifi's brilliant strike 4 minutes from time. There are no major injury concerns in the Breakers camp, who'll need to be full of running to combat Raul Blanco's West Adelaide side on Wednesday night. They're renowned for their expansive game and will be the Breakers' second of 3 matches in a week.
Yeah, well, that'll test us for a start this week. I mean, we've had the game Saturday, Wednesday night, and we're back up again on Saturday in Brisbane. So, I mean, that's as good a test as you'll get. But, yeah, it's something the players have got to get used to.
Few will forget last year's first Uncle Toby's event at Newcastle Beach, which provided the perfect homecoming for former Swansea Belmont Ironman Guy Andrews. He'll defend his title on Sunday and heads a record number of locals in this year's field. Blatchford, Blair and Rees are in the Uncle Toby's, while in the Devondale, Melissa Thurlow, Melanie Mitchell, Kirsty Liu, Peter Starr and Alison Civil will be representing the region.
Having all those girls in it, then all the local carnivals are going to be a lot more competitive, which is going to be good in general for when we actually get to the state and Australian titles, because we've had all that experience all the time.
Alison is one of 4 locals making her debut in the series, but she's the only one from Newcastle Surf Club and has no doubt competing on her home beach will provide a major boost.
I've learnt from here, I've grown up here, and this beach, I love this beach, it's the best beach around.
So hopefully it'll provide a big advantage for you.
Hopefully, just hope Huey's nice to me.
While our elite Ironmen and women will be doing battle in the surf, some of Australia's best triathletes will contest the Lake Macquarie Triathlon. The Olympic course event gets underway at 7:30 on Sunday morning at Spears Point Park. It was a right-hander's nightmare. Everywhere you looked around the picturesque Horizons golf course, there were left-handers. 224 of the Brotherhood of Khaki Handers are in the area for the week-long national championships.
The lefty's anthem. I think that I shall never see a sight more lovelier than thee, who stands left-handed on the tee and belts down a birdie 3. Golf clubs were made by fools like thee, but only God can make a lefty.
The butt of many gags for years, there were no left-handed jokes on these fairways. Instead, it was a lonely place for a right-hander, suffering the indignity of having to look for a khakis ball, then being the centre of their gags.
We can't help it if you stand the wrong side of the ball, can we?
We don't like to pick on them too much because the fact that they are right-handers have got trouble enough of their own, so we leave them at that.
There was a time when a left-hander was converted to play the other way around, but not anymore.
Like the school teachers used to smack us when we wrote left-handed, now they accept it, and it's accepted now that we can play and compete equally as right-handers.
In fact, there's a world championship for left-handers which will be played in Tasmania in 1998, which delighted Apple Islander Rob Tarr, who's put up with more than most over the years.
Do you do it a little bit tougher being from Tasmania and a left-hander?
Well, you know, we got two heads in Tassie, you know, so we see twice as much, you see, so it's not as bad as you think.
Here's to the lefties. Cheers. And beers.
Designed to lift the image of the Fire Brigade, next year's firefighter calendar has just been released. Newcastle is well represented. On page 1 is 28-year-old Craig Haddon.
Very surprising. I didn't expect to be Mr January, and now that I am, I guess it only means that I'll be the first month ripped out.
Although he's had to put up with endless ribbings from workmates, Craig says the calendar helps raise awareness about the physical fitness side of his job, as well as encourage fire safety.
Yeah, every month has a fire safety message included on it, and that's also very important. So it was a fun thing for me to do, but with a very serious message.
As for any future modelling aspirations,
I don't think so. We'll have to wait and see, but I can't see it happening like that.
And the all-important question, what does your mum think?
Oh, she loves it. She's already been out and bought a few copies of the calendar herself.
They'd waited hours for the chance to see this modern monument to materialism.
You could get lost in this place and shop forever.
It's new and it's big.
With hopes high, the doors to this shopper's heaven were parted. Shoppers charged the stores for what was proclaimed as the sale of the century, and there was no shortage of choice with more than 140 stores. It had taken $170 million and 13 months to achieve this instant success. The shopping town covers an area equivalent to 240 homes, with more than 3,500 car spaces.
I think the Central Coast needed something like this up here, and I think it'll really go down well.
Oh, I think it's terrific. I can't get over the building, and I've never seen so many people in all my life.
Westfield hopes it stays that way, trying to tap into the 250,000 people in the area. A growth rate of 3% ensuring more potential shoppers every year. It will provide many millions of dollars to the local economy and has already created more than 2,200 jobs. The management is so confident of the complex's success that it placed a time capsule on the floor to be reopened in 20 years' time. The future of small business in the area is less certain. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
John and Suzanne Mason live in a tiny piece of paradise at Rathmines beside Lake Macquarie, and one of the reasons for their gardening success is this. It's a domestic wastewater treatment plant that recycles their toilet, bathroom and kitchen water.
If they're keen on recycling or reusing water, then this is the obvious way to do it.
John has received a letter from Lake Macquarie Council giving him 3 months to connect to the new sewerage system which is going in across the region. Other residents too are angry they are being forced to change from their own recycling systems to the eventual ocean outfall sewer.
You go out to on the oceans and you do see the pollution, and I just find that we are solving that environmental problem by having it treated here in our own backyard.
But Lake Macquarie Council says it's just trying to manage the sewerage problem properly, keeping everyone on the one system.
It's far easier for council to be able to control one large system rather than thousands of small systems in the area.
Council also believes if too many of the domestic wastewater treatment plants are allowed, they could create a problem with runoff into the lake. Peter Ryan, NBN News. Golf can be a time-consuming and frustrating sport. But publican cum inventor cum golf lover Neil Russell may have a tonic to make the sport a little easier. It all started 8 years ago.
I got a golf ball and I drilled a hole in it and I put a little piece of rope in it and plaited an eye in it, and I drove a stake into the ground and then I hit the ball around the stake and it felt really good.
Some hard work later and this is the final product, the driving partner, having a hit in your own backyard without running for the ball. Inside the invention are some clever electronics that measure infrared light, which can give a readout on how far the ball is estimated to travel. Neil has already had interest from Kmart in America and other groups in South Africa. At around $150 for each kit, it could be his ticket to a life of golf.
It's a terrific big market.
These are the last 4 airworthy Wingeal aircraft owned by the RAF. Pilot Grant Piper says to a motorist it would be like travelling in a 1950s Chevy.
Built solidly, and there's nothing you can't fix on them. They go forever as long as you give them decent maintenance, and even if something fails, they'll keep on going.
Built after World War II, the planes were first used to train pilots. Then in 1969 they fulfilled a role in forward air control,
which was a role that they picked up in Vietnam. They realised they needed some close liaison with the ground forces for getting the aircraft, the bombers, onto the target in the jungle. They had difficulty screaming in at 500 knots, picking up a target and bombing without some extra assistance.
The RAF stopped using their 4 Wingeals in June this year. The auction will be held on Saturday week. Each plane is expected to fetch $100,000. Retired Ansett pilot John Ellis from Orange was just one of the interested buyers at Williamtown RAF Base today, inspecting the old planes.
They're very solid, and I think they've got a certain amount of appeal, particularly being a little old.
The public will have a final chance to view the planes next Friday morning before they go under the hammer on Saturday. Jane Anderson, NBN News. The new complex will be constructed at Newcastle's Mater Hospital. Known as the Mater Institute, it'll incorporate a breast cancer clinic, screening service and research. It'll also house melanoma research and education units.
Currently the services and research and education in breast cancer and melanoma, for instance, are scattered around the city at a number of campuses.
Chris Rigby from the Catholic Healthcare Services says the organisation is particularly interested in expanding its research and health prevention areas.
We see that putting our effort and our resources into research and prevention, that there will be a benefit for the future generations.
The plans were on display today. Recent telethons have already raised about $2 million to fund the project, but a further $4 million will be required.
Starting an appeal to raise more money for the completion of this building. We would also be expecting governments, both federal and state, to assist with the funding.
It's hoped the money will be raised within the next 12 months. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Give me the ticket, I'll give you some titties. Terrific.
These sort of poses don't come naturally to Shane Stratton. In fact, according to those who know the 26-year-old, he shies away from the limelight and the attention normally associated with bodybuilding. But attention is something this Port Stephens carpenter is going to have to get used to after winning the Mr. Universe amateur title in London last weekend. With a fat content of just 3%, Shane's muscle hardness, shape and size would judge better than 18 other national champions. He's worked hard for the title though, training an hour and a half every day to Lambton Gym and sticking to a diet which would turn many a stomach.
It consists of about 50 eggs a day with 10 yolks, 2 steaks, 2 chicken breasts, 400 grams of tuna, 2 cups of oats, about 6 cups of rice and about 3 litres of water.
When Shane started bodybuilding 5 years ago after giving up motorcycle racing, he had no idea he'd be so successful. He's put on 40 kilos in that time and is now planning for his next challenge.
Because I've won the amateurs, I can turn professional now. I'll go back next year and give the professional shot.
So am I talking to the next Arnie?
We don't know about that, we'll see how we go.
Ridden by John Powell and trained by Pat Webster, Montana Sands paid $5.70 and $1.70. Sun Tane and Winning Hand returned $1.40 and 2 even. Toowoomba with a Frontierer Class 6 plate over 1,200 metres was one of the features. A double to apprentice David Hayes with Kissicker returning $5.30 and $2.70. $2.50 for the fast finishing Knave, while there was no third divvy for Hot Mustard.
It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it, judging the best wines from the Hunter's small winemakers. 20 vignerons have entered 520 bottles in 19 different classes. But while it's not a big competition, these wines are well respected.
The dedicated man in a good year can produce as good a wine as anyone.
To qualify as small, winemakers can crush no more than 250 tonnes of grapes a year. This year wasn't a good vintage after the drought, and it's been especially tough on small producers.
So I can't see how any small winemaker in the district in 95 could make a profit, because nature wasn't good enough.
The winners of the competition will be announced at the Maitland Showgrounds on Thursday evening. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The 147-kilometre sixth stage of the Classic from Newcastle to the Bayswater Power Station near Muswellbrook was the second longest in the 1200k event. Its difficulty was increased by the southerly winds of up to 90 kilometres an hour buffeting the field. English Caltex team rider Ben Wilson and Kiwi Mark Randell were the first to break away from the bunch this morning, with some having problems on the old country bridges. But they were overhauled going through Singleton, where they were joined by a group of 8 riders, including Lillywhite, who crossed ahead of Germany's Patrick Moster and Matt Illingworth. The wind gave Lillywhite the yellow jersey, which he maintained through this afternoon's criterium around the Bayswater Power Station, despite a fall. State criterium champion Baden Burke positioned himself well in the 30k event, finishing ahead of Swede Martin Ritzel. The 8th stage of the Classic leaves Bayswater for Araring on the Central Coast tomorrow, with another criterium at Terrigal at 5 p.m.
Rhonda Sanderson and Michael Wilkinson drowned when the panel van they were passengers in ran off the esplanade at Spears Point and came to rest in Lake Macquarie. They were both thrown from the van and pinned under it in the shallow water. All 8 people who were in the panel van when it crashed had been drinking at a party earlier in the night. Central to the inquest was the question of who was driving the vehicle when it crashed. The coroner said there was no credible evidence that the owner of the van, Justin Tredenick, was the driver. Coroner Reimer said on the balance of probability, Jane Barry was the driver that night, but he added the evidence didn't come up to the required criminal standard of proof. Consequently, he agreed with an earlier district court jury's decision to acquit her of culpable driving. The father of Rhonda Sanderson was dissatisfied with the finding. Unhappy with the initial police investigation, he's referred the matter to the Ombudsman.
I don't think the coroner, on the evidence given to him, had any other choice.
However, Michael Wilkinson's father believes the coroner came to the right conclusion.
I didn't want to pursue it into the last court case, so I think it's over, it's finished, and I'm very glad it is.
Jane Anderson, NBN News.
It's as close to the real thing as you get without actually having an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. Field officers are sent in to test this cooling system at Lake Macquarie Council after reports of people coming down with the deadly condition. The test helps to identify the infected cooling systems so they can be cordoned off.
Scenario is that we've got an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, one centred around the Lake Macquarie area, and also a similar outbreak around the Central Coast.
It's a compulsory annual trial by the Public Health Unit to ensure the best possible preparation for a real disaster. The 13 councils from as far as Taree and the Central Coast joining the day so they can be ready for an outbreak in their areas.
Time is the essence in a situation like this. If a tower goes undetected for a number of days, we could have another 100 people infected.
But there are still problems to be sorted out.
We forgot the mobile phones. That's one important factor. A few minor things like that. Access to cooling towers was also another thing. Some of the people didn't know where these towers were.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Another day and another 143 kilometres for the cyclists leaving for Stage 8 from the Bayswater Power Station. Englishman Jeremy Hunt took the early points in the first sprint along the road to Singleton. It was another picturesque trip with spring in the air as the riders were being extra friendly. Several riders were trying to break away, but it wasn't until the 68-kilometre mark that Aussie Matt White and Dutchman Bob Reisenberg shook off the pack. It was a fight to the end, with the Dutchman winning the race to Lake Macquarie, taking the stage from White.
Well, I'm very happy. You're always happy when you win a race, but to me, I'm especially happy to win a stage in the Cycle Classic here.
But Englishman Chris Lillywhite still holds the overall race lead by 15 seconds from Stephen Swart. Steve Williams is the highest placed Aussie in fourth. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
I think this provides a new era in medicine where we no longer become dependent upon donor organs.